Hello everyone, Nubkeks here. So, we're coming off the BlizzCon 2017 and I was sitting down and thinking, what might Blizzard discuss about the future of Heroes of the Storm coming into this? Because a couple of years ago they brought us the big ranked update. Just this year they brought Heroes of the Storm 2.0 with loot boxes, the collection, all that sort of stuff. Overwatch heroes coming to the game. What might they talk about at BlizzCon moving forward into the next year? Or what might they be talking about, in the first half of next year, perhaps as well? What's the next kind of step for them to take? So it's quite likely they probably will talk about some things like the social aspect of the game. I'd love it, like something like clan system. We've got the new Battle.net beta, which might involve some of that stuff. So that definitely could be one area. But I was also thinking they might talk about quick match. They might update the game modes. They might update the drafting screen and the drafting system and hero selection just in general. They might update the hero roles tied into that. And why would they want to do that? What problems should they address and what sort of solutions could they come up with? That's what I want to talk about in this video. I'm going to be talking about Quick Match, and I've identified, I think, I feel are two major problems with Quick Match, and I'm going to give you two potential, maybe three potential solutions, and discuss the pros and cons of both solutions. I want to get your feedback in the comments, and then I'll come back with another video a couple of days later talking about some of the main points that you guys bring up, and I'll give kind of my thoughts on it, and then sort of my kind of conclusions, what I think will happen, what I would actually like to see. I'm just going to give you ideas in this video mostly. All right, so what are the problems? The core problem of Quick Match, which ties into both of the big things, is that in Quick Match, unlike in the competitive scene, so let's say the pro scene, Hero League, typically the stuff that streamers are doing as well. Whereas in the competitive scene, you very much have a tank and healer based meta. You always have a tank, you always have a healer, 99.9% of the games. You do not always have that in Quick Match. It's very common you go into a game where you might have no healer at all, no tank at all. Maybe you have a game where you've got a tank but no healer, or you've got a game where you have a healer but no tank. And this, I think, leads to an awful lot of problems. So the two big problems here. Number one, we've got a balance issue, right? Which is that, again, in the competitive scene, we've got tanks and we've got supports. Why? Because this is the best way to play. That's why the top teams in the world play this way. For example, Team Fnatic, who won the mid-season brawl, probably favorites to win BlizzCon as well. They have Breeze, who always plays tanks. They've got Smexy, who always plays healers. We've got Quacknix, basically always plays range damage dealer. We've got Wooby, who basically always plays either an off-tank solo lane warrior or a solo lane melee assassin, or perhaps just a melee assassin. And then we've got Schwimpy, who kind of plays the random heroes. He's more flexible. But you've got a pretty set in stone meta, a pretty set in stone way, the sort of standard team composition, which really does define most of competitive play across the different modes. This is a big contrast to quick play, where of course you don't have that, right? Because in quick play, it's 5 heroes thrown together semi-randomly and chosen as well without any idea what the enemy team is going to be putting together, and without any idea what type of map you're going to be playing on, right? And this leads to a big balance issue because Blizzard has to balance the game well around the competitive scene, because the competitive scene is advertising, right? The esports scene, what's it for? Why do they invest so much money into it? It isn't just because they like the esports scene, is it? No, it's not. They're investing money into it because they think it's going to give them a big return on money. How? Because it's advertising, right? It gets people, it's something that people watching it aspire to. It might bring in some new players as well, but especially for people who are already playing the game, it's something to aspire to, for them to learn from, to improve, to aim towards. It creates a community, something to spectate together, to discuss, all that sort of stuff. It's very important for Blizzard that they have a well-balanced and diverse and rich and deep competitive scene. So they have to balance Heroes of the Storm in such a way that it fits that standard meta with a tank and a healer and all the rest. It has to be good. It has to work on that level in a meaningful way. It has to be rich and deep and diverse, like I said. It has to be that, because if it's not, then the competitive scene becomes a joke. The streaming scene becomes a joke. All that sort of very public, very viewable stuff, which again I'm part of in terms of streaming and making videos, right? Like that stuff has to be good, because that's a huge part of where the game finds success. So they have to balance around that. However, then you've got this very conflicting problem where you also have to balance around quick play, which is a totally different meta from that competitive scene, because it's basically 5 random heroes, and you have to balance around that. Why? Because it's the most popular game mode. Over half of the games in Heroes of the Storm, across all modes, ranked, quick play, versus AI, brawls, all that sort of stuff, over half of them are played in quick play, in quick match. This brings it to another big problem, which is, well, you have to then, Blizzard also, as well as balancing for this particular meta, you also have to balance for this one, the quick play, the quick match one, because that's what most people are actually playing. And this is a big problem, because you can't balance for both properly. And this is something I constantly get in videos, right? People will commonly be calling it, heroes like, let's say, Valeera, as being extremely frustrating, as being this very unfun sort of impact on the game. Well, obviously, from the competitive scene, she's basically non-existent. The hero doesn't get played, right? But she's considered a big problem for people in quick play. And you're going to have this very consistently with a lot of heroes. So, for example, in quick play, where, again, you might not have supports or you might not have tanks, heroes that those heroes counteract are going to be more annoying. Valeera is a classic example. Genji. Heroes that thrive on picking off squishy, vulnerable targets, but are weak to being hit by crowd controls or just being sustained through themselves. Those heroes are going to thrive in quick play, but they can't be too overpowered. They have to be basically controlled in the ranked version as well, and competitive. And that's a big problem, right? Because you've got these two frustrations. Blizzard's going in 2 different ways. There's 2 different ways of balancing things. And then there's also, for the viewer, there's a very big disconnect between the games that you're playing in quick play and then what's actually happening on these streams and in the esports scene. Very, very different sort of stuff. And how do you take info from one and put it into the other? That can be very difficult. That brings me on to problem number 2. So problem number 1 is you've got this big balance consideration in terms of competitive meta versus quick match meta. Problem number 2 is, again, I do quite a bit of coaching. One of the very common things I get is I'll be like, oh, why did you go over to this part of the map? Why are you in this lane? Like, obviously you're playing Sonya, you want to be in the solo lane. And the player might come back to me and say, well, I've mostly played quick match. I didn't even know there was a solo lane, and I've no idea where to go. I've no idea what to do. And this is one of the fundamental problems, again, that comes and is exacerbated by the quick match thing, which is, in terms of the best way to play and approaching that competitive meta, which the game has to be balanced well around, it's very difficult to learn that in quick match because the meta simply doesn't facilitate it. So, for example, let's talk about solo lanes. Let's consider solo lanes and rotations and how compositions can affect that in a very drastic way. Not even in terms of PvP. We'll ignore fighting the other team, but just in terms of fighting objectives, fighting forts, doing the objectives, fighting mercs, pushing down structures, clearing lanes. Let's talk about that in terms of team comp. How does it change if you've got a tank and support meta as opposed to we might be 5 damage dealers type meta? Well, if you've got a tank and support, number 1, in terms of rotating between lanes and setting up a solo lane, things change a lot, right? Excuse my nose, itchy. Things change a lot because you only have... My dog's making noise in the back. You only have... warriors and supports aren't very good at clearing lanes, usually. So you have to assign your heroes much more carefully to make sure that you can actually deal with the minion waves and have good control of the lanes and get that experience, right? So that changes, number 1. Number 2, in a very big way, pushing in, taking down structures, particularly I'd say taking down the core, actually going to end the game, making aggressive plays like that, that's a lot easier if you've got a tank or a support. Why? Because the tank can tank up damage from the structures. The healer can go and mitigate the damage. Like, you're pushing core, much easier if you've got a Rehgar who's like, well, I'll chain heal you guys up. I'll put down a healing totem. I'll ancestral someone if they get low. Maybe I can give shields with lightning shield. All that sort of stuff. That makes it so much easier to do it. So then when you come to quick match, what do you find is people kind of go to random lanes because it's not really that important because you've got 5 assassins, so you've got wave clear everywhere. They're kind of in random places. The games go much, much longer because, well, just actually pushing down structures aggressively is not something you can do. If you take any damage, it's kind of damage that's permanently on you. You don't have a healer that can top you up. So it's far more chaotic going for objectives. Taking a merc camp is a much more dangerous thing. So it's this much more chaotic thing, and it really prevents actually people from learning how to play in the competitive meta, because you spend hours, maybe hundreds, thousands of games, right, playing in quick match and building up these habits and this understanding of the game that doesn't actually translate to how it works in competitive, because you're basing it on a composition that hundreds of games without a tank, hundreds of games without a healer. But you've got far more different options. You have to move much more differently around the map in terms of strategy when you do have those things, because you can push those structures more aggressively, you can end things earlier, you can take the merc camps, you have to be clearing the waves and soaking them appropriately when you've got those particular roles, right? That's a very big difference. And that's, again, another major disconnect between the competitive scene and the quick match scene, right? That's another major disconnect. So for me, those are two of the biggest problems. In fact, there's a third problem, which I have as well, which is, I think it's also a big deal, which is in terms of actually enjoying and getting the most out of heroes, right? There's a lot of heroes in the game that thrive in a certain composition, or that thrive on a certain map or a certain type of map, or that they counter certain heroes or certain compositions. You don't get that in quick match, right? Let's say the Lost Vikings, for example, especially good on Garden of Terror. Well, when you queue up for quick match, you could get any map. You could get any map. So I don't remember if there's a map rotation for quick match anymore. Perhaps there is. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, you get any map. So you could get the Lost Vikings on a map like Battlefield of Eternity, where they're pretty rubbish. Or you could get them on a map like Garden of Terror, where they're really good. This, again, for people playing in quick match, it gives you a very distorted idea of what heroes are actually good. Some heroes, just by the way quick match works, right? And again, it's the most played mode. There's a whole bunch of heroes that are probably you're never really going to see or get the most out of, because you simply don't have the meta to fit them. And then again, in competitive, likewise, there's going to be a bunch of heroes that are going to have to be balanced a bit around quick match that suddenly aren't going to see much play. Valera, Gaslow, Nova, those kind of heroes don't see much play in competitive because they have to be balanced around the quick match. So by the fact that we've got these two ways pulling us across, it divides the heroes that you're actually going to play. The hero pool is actually much smaller than you think in terms of things that will actually work and that you can actually have a good, fun, balanced game with. Particularly so with quick match, where it's totally random. So I think those are the big problems for me with quick match, right? I mean, let's talk about a couple of solutions, a couple of potential solutions, right? What could Blizzard do to deal with this? Well, I'm playing quite a bit of World of Warcraft at the moment. So this is one potential solution, which I think is pretty bad, but just to give you an idea, right? So this is the dungeon finder in World of Warcraft. Because again, in World of Warcraft, you do dungeons as a 5-person team. And you can see probably where Heroes of the Storm got a lot of its influence, right? Because you always have a tank, you always have a healer, and then you've got 3 damage dealers. When you queue up to do a dungeon, you sit in the queue, and this is what you see, right? You can see, oh, we've got our 3 damage dealers now. I'm queued up as a healer. Here's our healer spot. We're waiting for a tank. This is about our average wait time, okay? And that works relatively well for World of Warcraft. What would be the good things about this in Heroes of the Storm? How could they implement it? Well, I mean, one clear way they could implement it directly like this. When you queue up for quick match, it will pop up, again, this sort of display. It says, okay, you guys have a healer, you've got 3 damage, we're waiting for a tank now before we go into a game. This is the estimated wait time. When we get a tank, we'll launch into the game. The enemy team will also have a tank, a healer, and 3 damage. We're going to balance it against that. And we can prevent mirror matches and all the rest as well. One nice thing you can do as well, which Warcraft does too, is let's say that there's not many people queuing up for tanks at a particular time. You could then highlight it when you're queuing up, right? And say, hey, look, would you like to play a tank? There's not many people queuing up for tanks right now. We are going to reward you. I think there's great opportunity for this. Like, I mean, look at the loot box system that they just put in. That's great opportunity for rewarding people and encouraging people to play different game modes. For example, maybe like queuing up again, it's like a 2-man team in Team League, or queuing up as a tank for quick match, right? To try get the queues a bit more balanced. Say, we'll give you a loot box. I mean, it could be like a 1-item loot box, maybe a 2-item loot box. There's loads of ways that you could tweak this to reward players, to ensure that there's a good balance of the different roles going into your games, and to try to keep queue times as small as possible, right? Creating good games, good, nice, balanced games, keeping queue times reasonable as well. How do you do that? Well, I think giving some rewards could be a really good way of doing it. What are some of the cons of this? Number one, the major con, without any question, is that Heroes of the Storm is not this simple, right? there's a lot more compositions than one tank, one healer, and 3 damage. There's compositions with 2 healers. There's compositions with 2 tanks. There's an awful lot more variety that goes into the game than simply these things. So I think that's obviously a major limitation, which basically crosses this option off the charts in terms of that. But it does still, I feel, point you in kind of a rough direction of what they could be looking for. I mean, one adaptation on this is, well, let's say maybe when you queue for quick match, it says, well, we need 1 tank, we need 1 healer, and then we're going to have 3 random heroes. At least one of which will be a damage, let's say, okay? So we'll always have 1 tank, 1 healer, and then at least 1, maybe even at least 2 of those will be damage. Maybe that would work. That potentially could, and it might give you a bit more balanced game. But again, the major issue is that we're trying to move towards maybe more, including more of the competitive meta, so that the Blizzard balancing the game, it can be more focused. We can kind of expand the pool of viable heroes and such. Perhaps that wouldn't fully address the problem. There's also Overwatch, right? And Overwatch has a pretty interesting approach as well. Let's talk about the pros and cons of this and how it works. So this is the Overwatch quick play screen. So you can see that we've got 6 people on the team in Overwatch, but you can see what everyone on your team is going to pick. Like, I would like to play Torbjorn, and then you can lock it in, and then it's locked in. In Overwatch, you can keep changing, because you can change heroes in Overwatch. But it says that these are what my teammates want to play. Here's all the heroes. You can see what map it is on as well. And then there'll be team tips, right? So in this case, it's saying no offense heroes. No one's chosen any heroes to do damage. It might say, oh, there's no tank heroes, guys. Maybe you want to pick a tank hero. There's no support hero. We should probably get a support hero, a healer. There's too many damage heroes. There's too many tank heroes. So you could put this into Heroes of the Storm. You queue up for a game. And then instead of the game trying to create a team based off the heroes that you've chosen, right, and putting you up against another team, and then boom, you load in, everyone's picked their heroes, you load into the game. Instead, it just finds 5 players of equal skill, 5 players of similar skill, puts them against a team of 5 players of equally similar skill, and then it puts you into a game with a screen like this. It goes, hey, this is the map you're on. You're on Infernal Shrines. Here's your 5 teammates. Here are the heroes. You can show, maybe you've got a minute to show what heroes you want. There'll be team tips guiding you through, and then the game will launch, and there you go. I think there's some big pros and some big cons to this as well. Pro number 1 is that it alleviates the problem of heroes which are very dependent on certain maps or certain team compositions, because you get to see what map it is, you get to see what sort of heroes your teammates are going to be picking, so you can kind of tailor things around. So you might, again, for example, say, hey, we're on Infernal Shrines, tell you what, let's make a Kerrigan composition, right? We'll have Kerrigan clearing out the shrines, and then we'll build up a team that can support Kerrigan in doing that somewhat, right? It opens up a lot more options for actually exploring heroes the way they've been, Blizzard has had to balance them. So that's a big positive to it, I think. Also, it does give you, it's a way of teaching players and guiding players towards the competitive balance. Again, that's Blizzard has had to have built into the game, right? Through the team tips, it will guide you towards making a good team composition, so that you don't feel totally frustrated in a game where, like, well, my hero just doesn't work. This hero keeps killing me. I can't do anything about it. You'll be guided towards building a good team composition. So that's nice as well. It also would presumably get pretty quick queues, right? Because instead of having to have a whole bunch of quick match composition rules, like, oh, we can't have, these 5 heroes put together in a quick match team, or we need to find this to balance it out. Instead, it just goes, okay, 5 players against 5 players. They're all relatively similar skill. Throw them in a game, let them start playing. I think that's kind of nice too. What are some of the downsides of this? The biggest downside that I can see for this would be a very large increase probably in toxicity and in room for rage, which is, you get into a game like this, you're going, okay, great, we know what map we're on, we can build a team comp together, and then your teammates all go, well, hey, we all want to play offense heroes, we all want to play stealthy damage dealers. That could make that gives a lot more opportunity for rage, right? Because instead of quick match at the moment, where it's Blizzard, it's a computer, it's the algorithm that does it. So when you get in a game and you've got 5 specialists, you go, oh, Blizzard. It's a bit frustrating, but then it's also as well balanced against the enemy team. The enemy team should also have an equally derpy team composition, usually. Whereas if it was something like this, where it's player choice, instead of being, oh, Blizzard and your system's kind of dumb, instead it's, oh, my teammates, it's their fault. And that makes it a lot more personal. I think that would create a lot more anger. There'd be a lot more opening up the chat, being like, why did you pick Gazlo, you silly sausage? in much more vulgar terms, right? There'd be a lot more opportunity for flaming, a lot more fodder for people to flame within the game, within quick play, which is maybe not what people want. So yeah, I think that would be perhaps a big downside, which is you're giving people the opportunity to choose something which does follow the competitive meta. But of course, if they want to play 5 support heroes, they can still do that if that's what they want to do, and they might decide to, because it's quote unquote, it's just quick match, right? We're just playing for fun. It's what we want to do, so we're going to do it. This isn't competitive mode. Whereas people that play quick play with a more competitive mindset or have very strong feelings on the meta, that might give them a lot of stuff to rage about. I think that would be the biggest drawback here in terms of this. That's one of the maybe one of the own and mainly drawbacks that I see, is just the amount of fuel for rage that this could provide. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about this particular system, but it's just putting choice in players' hands. When players decide not to choose it, things can get kind of messy. Let's talk about maybe one final solution as well, because I was considering this too, which is here the developers might change how hero roles work in the game as well, because we know that the current role system is a bit outdated. It's pretty clunky. I think a lot of people aren't happy with it, and even in the quick matchmaking rules at the moment, heroes aren't matched based on roles, right? So for example, Sonya is considered a bruiser. We've got warriors, assassins, specialists, supports, but then we've also got bruisers, which are more damagey based warriors. So I think they include Zarya and Sonya and Varian in that group, for example. Then you've also got sustain heroes, as Blizzard calls them, which are heroes like Tassadar, Tyrande, which aren't main healers. So these are considered separate things. So we might see Blizzard actually rework the role system a little bit, and perhaps they could change quick match this way. Perhaps the simplest way as well that they could improve quick match, solution number 3 then, would be to keep it much as it is now. You pick whatever hero you want to play. Actually, that's a drawback with this particular thing, is that you're not guaranteed in as flame free an environment to be able to play what hero you particularly want. So let's say I just want to play Nova all the time at the moment in quick match. I can do that. I just pick Nova and I queue for a quick match and I get matched into a game. The matchmaker tries to create games around that, and there you go. I just go play Nova. Whereas, if a hero is considered bad, let's say Nova is considered bad, I might get flamed a lot if this was the new system. So there you go. That's another drawback for that particular system. Again, tied into the flaming thing too. They could just stick. Solution number 3 is Blizzard just sticks with the quick match as it is. You just pick your hero, you queue up, and you put in a game. But then they introduce incentives for people to play different roles. Or perhaps even solution. Again, they just introduce what I was saying about incentives. They go, oh, not many people are playing tanks right now. If you want to queue up as a tank, you get a quicker game. Maybe you get a mini loot box, and just try to encourage it. And they try then to have the matchmaker favor games with at least a tank and a healer a bit more. There's always going to be players as well that don't want that, right? They want the chaos of 5 assassins. So perhaps solution number 4 then even is that they split it up into more game modes, right? They have quick match, be this sort of Overwatch style blind pick, and then maybe have some sort of new brawly mode where it's you just pick whatever hero you want and you go kind of crazy. Maybe some of the brawl maps, right? And some of the fun rules that are there. Just kind of being like, okay, we've got this brawl playlist too, where you can just pick whatever hero you want. You get fun maps with quicker rules. It's not the same maps which are used for competitive play, which are balanced around the competitive meta and the tank support type meta, which is going on, and we have to balance around that for those maps. You're not going to be playing 5 random heroes in that, but we'll give you game like maps and modes and rule sets that are specifically tailored to that more chaotic playstyle. So I think the pro of this solution is that it doesn't change the game experience too much for people. And probably make quick match more representative of competitive. It really focuses in Blizzard's design decisions, I think, much better between these are the competitive maps and the idea of team comps and just Heroes of the Storm as we understand it now, and then also including this more fun brawly type play as well, which people might want. The downside is you've got more game modes, means more queues, which means people are split up between different queues, longer queue times, worse matchmaking if there's a smaller group of people to play with as well. So that could be a problem there. So yeah, there you go, guys. That is, I think I've talked more than long. Oh god, I've talked more than long enough. But yeah, that's what I'm kind of looking at in terms of quick match. What do you guys think? Do you think that there is a problem with quick match? Do you agree with me that there's a problem in terms of there's a big disconnect between competitive play that people are watching and quick match in terms of kind of the more random hero pools and compositions, and that this leads to, in my opinion, the two problems that I highlighted were, number one, it's difficult for people to learn how to even play the game in a competitive way and make the transition between quick match and Hero League, because the metas are so different. It just doesn't facilitate that. It teaches you weird lessons that only apply to quick match but are contradicted by competitive. Problem number two, which is that Blizzard has to balance the game around competitive, but then they also have to balance it around quick match, and they're so different that this creates a big problem, and it limits the hero pool and the viable heroes. Does lead, I think, sometimes to some frustrating hero design for people that are in either camp most of the time. There can be particular bugbears in either one that lead from this and things like that. What do you think about those problems? Do you see them as problems? And then what about the solutions I was talking about? Perhaps adding in like a queue system where Blizzard, there has to be a tank or a healer in each match. Perhaps a lighter approach of just facilitating it, encouraging it through loot boxes. Winston, my puppy, is off there sniffing in the corner. What about like the Overwatch style kind of blind pick mechanic, where you can see what your teammates are doing and it gives you sort of team tips to guide you? What about the idea of maybe adding a couple of different queues where you do have a more blind pick type thing, which is closer to competitive, and then perhaps a separate, more chaotic, whatever hero you want to play, specially tailored maps and game rules to fit that in? What do you guys think? I'm curious to see what you think, and like I said, I'll do a video. Look, this little fella, he's sniffing around. He's sniffing around there. Hello. What a good boy. Good doggy. Good. Winston, what do you think? What do you think about it? Winston's hardcore. He only plays competitive. He sneers at quick match fools. He's like, you fools, you don't know how to play the game. You're not hardcore like me. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, and yeah, bye-bye.